Hey there, folks. Mike Enders here. Wanted to say thank you for joining Kevin Thorne and I at the DevLearn 2012 pre-conference session on Intermediate to Advanced Storyline. And what I wanted to do was go through, I covered a project with you, an intermediate level project that showed various techniques in storyline, brought them all together to create this really snazzy drop-down, multiple drop-down, I might say, question which can then be submitted to an LMS to be scored, if you will. The reason this is kind of cool is because if you go in to create a quiz question, you'll see that there's no way to do that. There's no stock way to make that happen. We got to be a little bit tricky here, and that's where the intermediate to advanced storyline comes in. You'll notice that there's a number of things going on over here in our trigger area and our slide layers. What I want to do is take you from this, where you're starting from scratch, and to this point. And by the end, you remember we talked about being able to speak storyline. I want to take you through some of the conceptual things here, but most importantly, from start to finish, how to do this so that you can, when you're back in the office, when you're back home, when you want to do this on your own, you've got a record for how we did. What are the steps to make this happen? So without further ado, let's jump right into it and get started. All right, so the first step that we are going to take here is we are going to create our question. And now, one thing you'll notice, see how the text box here, when I click in and I click out, it's changing size? That is because of right down here, it's not at 100% in the zoom. If I go to the zoom and put it at 100%, nothing will change. But in order to keep this recording at a usable size, I've got it shrunk down a little bit. So you'll see that this is going to alter a little bit. We'll need to pay attention to that later on. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a shape here. I'm going to bring a shape, bring a rectangle. I'm going to click and drag and put it right into my first gap. I can double click that. It's going to activate the shape styles and panels area. So then I can alter that piece. And one other tip here, if I hold my Alt key down when I click and drag, that's going to give me a smoother drag, a little more refined ability to do that. So just want to point that out to you. So we got that there. Now what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to type right in there and say select. I'm not going to worry about the fonts here. I'll let you do the font, matching up your fonts, but highly recommend that you do that. You know, go in, work on the font size and the bold and such. Now, if this is my first part of the question, what I want to do for the future, and I mentioned this during the pre-con, we always want to label our assets. Every time you add something to the screen, if you know you're going to be interacting with it, you're going to be selecting it over here in the trigger area, you're going to want to make sure that you name it. So at DevLearn, there are blank awesome programs. I'm going to call this number of programs. That is going to be my square there, or my rectangle. Now, if I hold my control key down and I click and I drag, I can drag that down and it'll double it up. I will have to change the name up here. Number of presenters is what I'll call this one. And then I'm going to hold my control key, click and drag down, and I can also take that a little bit bigger. This is going to be called, I'll call this one location. Okay, now your question obviously is going to be different, but make sure that you can always quickly at a glance see what these boxes are referencing, what part of the question is going to reference. So what I want to do here then, at DevLearn there are blank awesome programs. So this is going to be a number. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is selected, go to my states area, edit the states. And now let's say I want 3 options for this. Okay, think of this as how many choices does the learner have. Maybe they've got 3 options. You want to have 200, 300, and 400. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this one 200. I'm going to create another one called 300. And I'm going to call another one 400. Whoop, not 49, 400. Right here, I'm going to double click on this to make sure that the 200 state is active, and I'm going to come up here and call this 200, and I'm going to name that, change that on the box. See, you'll see it change down here as well. Do the same for 300. And down here, 400. Okay. So now what I want to do is the same thing for these next 2 boxes. I'm going to pause this and let you do the same for yours. But what I would do is I would come down here then. I'm going to edit my states. If I know it's the same thing for presenters, maybe it's 100 presenters, 200, 300. So I'm going to go through, and then in terms of location, take care of that as well. So I'm going to do it on my end, let you do it on yours. I'm going to pause here and come on back and join me for the next step. All right, we're back, and I have my objects all filled in here. You'll notice down here as well, I've got the states for the locations, the ARIA, the Bellagio, Caesars. And again, think of this as what are the multiple choice options for each of these areas? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then a few different locations here as well. Now the next step that we want to do, for each of these objects, we're going to create a layer. And what we're going to be, just to give you a heads up, those that are thinking, where are we going with this? On the layer, we're going to present them with their options that they can choose. So what we're going to do is select down here this new layer icon, click it 1, 2, 3 times, and to keep everything the same in terms of the nomenclature, I'm going to call this one here Programs, this one I'm going to call Presenters, and this one I'll call Locations. Now, selecting my base layer once again, and again, a good tip that we pointed out is that you always want to make sure that the layer that you want to do something with is selected. Oftentimes I find myself, I go to select or I go to add something and I add it on a layer rather than the base layer where I meant it to be. So just want to pay attention to where you are selected down here in the lower right. Now, we want to be able to trigger these layers to appear when the individual clicks on one of these objects. So right now I'm on my number of programs object here. So I'm going to create a trigger that says show layer programs when the user clicks this object. I'm going to click OK. Now here's a time saver. I can copy this, come to presenters, paste, come to locations, paste. So what does that allow me to do? Where it says location now, all I have to do is select the locations layer, presenters, the presenters layer. It's a big time saver. Maybe not if you've only got 3 of these, but imagine you've got 20 objects. Quickly you can copy and paste triggers to other objects that you want something similar, and then just come into the trigger panel and make that change happen. Really a cool time saver. So I've got my objects, I've got triggers to show the layers. I need to put something on the layers, and this is where the really cool magic is going to start. So I come down to my first layer. I'm going to come to my programs layer here. And I know, if I go back here, for the programs, if I look at the states, I have 3 options, 200, 300, 400. And I want to keep those in mind. Come back to programs. So I'm going to insert some options here. I'm going to use a text box. 200. I'm going to use my control key, drag. 300. Or you can use Control and Shift. It'll make sure it drags it straight down. And 400. So 200, 300, 400. I'm going to work on the formatting. I'm going to center these up. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. And I'm also going to do this. I'm going to give it a shape fill here. And maybe I then make that text white so it really pops out. Now using my format painter, what I can do is I could format the other two to look exactly the same. Perfect. And to give it one extra cool little touch here, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go to the states, edit my states, hover, oops, give it that hover state. And then on the hover state, I'm going to give it a little lighter fill right there. Perfect. And then once again, I can use my format painter here. Oop, come on. Work for me, format painter. And paint the 3 and the 4, and it'll add that state and the color as well. So what this does is if we go to preview this slide right now, I'm going to select this right here, and you'll notice that this pops up. Now this is the layer showing through, and it's got this neat little overlay hover effect. Okay, perfect. Now what we want to do however, with this, I'm going to select these. I'm going to bring these up and drag them right below where that selection object, that button, is on the base layer. I could even take those and size those right there if I want. So what we have then, if we come here and preview this again, I click, see how they appear right below. Now you notice a little gap in there. I'd want to work on that gap. I don't like the gap, so I'd have to move these up just a tad to make sure that there's one solid little box there that's working. Let's preview that again. I know it's the tiny little details. There we go, look at that. Perfect. Now, if I had a lot of options, what I could do, and I'm not going to do that here. I did it actually in the source, but I'm going to show it to you just in case you do. You could actually use a scrolling panel. You add the scrolling panel in. You select your objects, not the scrolling panel itself, and you can drop those into the panel. There we go. And I can bring the panel over. I can preview that. Here we go, and I can scroll up and down. Again, in this case, I've only got 3. I really don't need it, although it does kind of give it that official, this is a really cool looking program with a drop-down panel type of look to it, but certainly is not necessary to go to those lengths. So I'm going to take those out for now and just drag those back out and delete that panel. And take those once again and move them right below. So, what I would like you to do is to go through those same steps for both the presenters and the locations. Create what I just did on each of your other layers. So on the presenters layer, add in those numbers from your timeline. Here, if we go down to the base layer, 100, 200, 300 is what I have. And then I also have, in terms of my locations, the Aria, the Bellagio, and Caesars. But go to each of these layers and create that very same thing. And then make sure that it looks all nice and snazzy. One last cool thing you could do, by the way, if you go to your animations, animate the layer, fade it in, gives it a cool, nice little look and feel, so it animates right down below. Then the learner can go and click it. All right. Take that next step and join me back here. Oh, hey, just wait. Oh, I know I told you to go work on it, but just a second. You know what you can do, by the way? Copy this. Go to your presenters, paste it. Take it right where you want it to be, and then just change those numbers, right? If it was 100, 200, 300, all you got to do is go 100, 200, 300, copy and paste from there. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Copy, go to your locations, paste it, bring it down where you want it to be, stretch it out, make it look marvelous, and then enter in your locations, the Aria, etc., etc., etc. All right. Now back to you. Go do it, then come back. We'll continue. Really cool stuff coming. Okay, we are back, and we have, in each of our layers, we have these drop-down lists. And so what it should look like is something like this. You should be able to go in and preview and have these drop-downs. There we go. Perfect. Looks great. I hope, by the way, that you labeled all of your items, because it will be a big help. If you haven't, go do it now. So, here we have the opportunity to come down and see some really cool stuff. But you'll notice that when I click on the numbers, nothing's happening. What I want to have happen is when the user clicks on 200, for example, this box is going to change to 200. If they click on 300, the box is going to change to 300. This is where those states that we created here, the 2, the 3, the 4, and so on, this is where we are now going to make the magic happen. I'm going to come to my programs layer, and I've got this drop-down list, so I'm going to start adding triggers in. What I would like to have happen, let's speak storyline a little bit, I want, when the user clicks this 200, I want this selection box on the base layer, I want that to change to the state 200 that we selected, that we programmed in there. So what I'm going to do is on my, my programs layer there, 200, I'm going to add a trigger that says, change the state of that object on the base layer. And once again, this is where it comes in handy. We've named it. It's easy to find now. Number of programs. Change that to the state. And here's the 2, the 3, the 4 that we've programmed in there. Remember? To 200 when the user clicks that. Let's go take a look at that. Select 200. Boom, it changes. Perfect. Now what I would like to have happen, see how this is covering up the number below there? It looks kind of goofy, or that box below. So what I'm going to do is add one more trigger, and it's going to say hide layer, this layer, when the user clicks. I almost said the loser. You're not a loser, nor are your learners when they click the number 200. So what that's going to do then, they click 200, boom, it changes and it hides that layer. Gives it a nice effect. So what we want to do then is we want to add those same triggers for the others as well. Okay, so I can once again come and copy, paste, select my next one, paste. And now, here's the speed. Change the state of number of programs to 300 when they select 300, 400 when they select 400. See how that copy and pasting of triggers is awesome, right? Copy, I can copy to hide this layer and add that to 300 and then add that to 400. So suddenly doing this becomes really fast. And here's what we've got. 200, 300, 400. Perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and do this exact same thing for the 2 other layers as well. So I'm going to pause here and let you do that, and then let's reconvene after you are finished. All right, folks. All right, so we are back on each of your layers now. You should have this all set up, and it's probably looking absolutely spectacular. So you can go through and you can select each of these, and it is looking absolutely dynamite. What we've done is we started on our base layer. As a quick recap, we've added an object. Each of these objects, we've created a state for each potential option. Think of it as a quiz question in and of itself. We want the learner to be able to choose one of 3 things, 2, 3, 4. We've created a layer. And on that layer, we've created 3 options for them to click on. Text boxes that we've given some color and a little hover state to change. And we've told each of these boxes, you know what? When the learner clicks 200, on that base layer, change this box to the state of 200. And we've done the same for 3 and 4. And we've done it for each of these areas as well. And then we've also added a little hide layer trigger just so it looks nice and snazzy and disappears and floats up, and it looks great. But here's the downside. Right now, we've got this slide and it's looking spectacular, but it's really not a question yet. It's not a quiz question per se, it's just kind of hanging out. So what are we going to do? My friends, we are going to leverage the Convert to Freeform tool right here. The Convert to Freeform lets you take any slide and convert it into a quiz question so that it can become part of a quiz, that the results can be reported to the results screen or to your LMS. Here's what I want you to do first though, because I like to tease you a little bit. I want you to add 2 objects off screen. Why are we doing that, Mike? Because I'll tell you in a little bit. I want you to call them yes and no. Or you could call them correct and incorrect. I'm going to go with yes and no because it's my little canvas. I can do it. And I'm going to come down here and label them because you always want to label it. It's going to make it easier. Yes and no. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come on up and Convert to Freeform. If you've not used this yet, oh, it's really cool. Click it. Watch the magic. You get to choose then what type of quiz question you want to convert this into. For our purposes right now, we're going to choose pick 1. Oh, wait a minute, Mike. Is that why we just added 2 things over here? Yes, it is, because one's going to be correct. If I click OK, it'll show you. See, we labeled it. Oh, easy to find. Yes and no. And I'm going to say yes is the correct answer right here. Save and close. Now you'll notice that what has happened is it has created this whole question interface for us. We can go back and we can edit that area. We've got our correct and our incorrect feedback layers here. I didn't have to do any of that. The Freeform took care of it for me. Pretty dynamite. Now, depending on how you've got your player set up and what you've got going on, you'll notice that there's no submit button here yet. If I come down here to my gear panel, if it's not active for you, what you'll want to do is you will want to, and maybe yours says player defaults here, select custom for slides if you need to, but you shouldn't have to. What you can do is select submit. You want to make sure your submit button is there. You'll notice that right down here on the right, the trigger appears that says submit the interaction. Perfect. Now, here's where probably we're edging up towards more of the advanced stuff. So pay close attention. What we are going to do, okay, and I'm probably going to pause here and I'll come back and we'll start on the next section. What we're going to do is we're going to leverage the states that we have created, and we're going to tell storyline. Okay, wait for it. This is really cool. When the user clicks the submit button, if the states are correct, okay, and we're going to tell storyline which states are correct, then change yes to selected because yes is the correct answer. If these states are not correct in the correct order, they're not how we want them to be, then make no, select no as the answer. Because we're going to put that right down here in this trigger area so that when the user clicks the submit button, storyline is going to say, okay, if this says 200, this says 300, this says the aria, we're going to say it's correct. Okay, let's submit it as correct. If one of these is not 200, 300 or the aria, we're going to say no, it's not correct. Oh, maybe your head is hurting. Oh my goodness. Let's stop for just a moment. I'll let that sink in. We'll come back. We'll do it. It'll make sense once you see it. Hey there, folks. All right, so now we're going to the really cool part here. This is maybe a little bit more of the highly intermediate to advanced area. Because what we're going to do is we are leveraging that freeform question to make some magic happen here. For now, what I want you to do, we've got all this stuff on the screen. I want you to, oh, not that stuff. I want you to drop off everything on the screen. Because you know what? It doesn't really matter right now. What we've done when we hit that convert to freeform button, we hit the convert to freeform, we really did this. We created a freeform question. Right now, all the other stuff that we've done really has nothing to do with this question. We've said, you know what, there are two options here. The correct option is yes. If we go to preview this right now, you'll notice that it's a question. You'll see a little glow depending on what I choose, yes and no. When I submit it, if I have no selected, it's incorrect. Remember, we told Storyline that yes was the correct answer. Both of these belong to one button set. Okay, the pick one button set that's created. That's how Storyline does this. You can only choose one at a time. Each of these has the normal state and a selected state. So only one can be selected at a time. They switch back and forth. That's what the button set does. It switches them, it toggles them back and forth from selected to not selected, depending on which one you click. So Storyline is only concerned about these two objects. Okay, that's all it's focused on right now. So what I'm going to do is move them off the screen. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to bring these back. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, Storyline, I know that you're only concerned ultimately with whether yes is correct or not, whether it's selected or not. But what I want you to do is I want you to change which one of these is selected. I want you to do the clicking for me based upon what I choose over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring these into play. We're going to tell Storyline, if the learner has these states correct, then make yes selected before you submit, okay? Could you do that for me? Okay, it's like a little assistant. If the learner does not have these states, if they don't select the correct states, then make no selected so that when this question gets submitted, then it's going to be incorrect, okay? That is how we make this magic happen. We bring this into the equation. So here's how we do that. We add a trigger and we say, hey, Storyline, change the state of yes to selected. So Storyline, do that for me, would you please? I want you to make yes the selected state, which means the question is going to be correct when the user clicks the submit button on the condition that my number of programs is equal to, let's say 200 is my answer. And if the number of presenters is equal to, we'll say 300. So we've got 200, 300. And if the location is equal to the aria. If these three things are all selected, if that's what the states are, then change the state of yes to selected. Okay? Look at that. Perfect. Now, we also need to do another one. We need to tell Storyline, select no if that's not the case. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy it and paste that trigger. Whoops. You'll notice no was selected, so it's putting it on the no. I need to get rid of that. I need to undo. Make sure nothing is selected on my screen, and then paste it. There, now it puts it down there for me. So, change the state of no to selected when the user clicks the submit button on the condition that the number of programs is not equal to 200. And I'm going to come up here, and I'm changing this to or. Or, if the number of presenters is not equal to 300, or if the location is not equal to the aria. Now, So let's take a look at what this means here. Change the state of yes to selected. So you are clicking that for me here when the user clicks the submit button if these three are what I want them to be. Change it to no if these three are not how I want them to be. Now I need to do one last thing. I need to put this player trigger down at the bottom, the submit interaction. Otherwise it's going to submit it and not read these. So I bring that all the way down to the bottom here. Now when we go to preview, I make my selections 200, 300, and the ARIA. This should be correct. Yes, it is. So what happened is Storyline evaluated, is this state and this state and this state what Mike wants them to be? Because if they are, I'm going to select yes. I'm going to change yes to selected and then submit this. Okay, and yes is the correct answer in that pick one. If it is not, oops, let me do that again. If these states are not correct, then it's going to be incorrect. Perfect. So there you go. Okay, what we're doing is we are leveraging the Freeform pick one, and then we're still using it. We're still using this yes and no as the answer, but we're telling Storyline, you know what? Based upon what I do here, change yes or no to selected, okay, and then submit it. So basically we're adding a little functionality to this, but that, my friends, is how you get a multiple drop-down quiz question that can be graded, okay? So now the grade, did you get it correct? Is it not correct? Right here we can put in more information. We can give the number of attempts, etc. We can put our points down here, but that is how you create this really cool drop-down quiz question. All right, well, I hope that all makes sense for you. If not, send me an email, hop on the eLearning Heroes forums, because there are a lot of really smart folks there that share things like this every single day. Hope to see you there. Take care, everybody.